All right, back at it here on the Kaufman Corner podcast with you as always, Soren Petro, good doctor. Rany Jazayerli with you, and a special edition of the Kaufman Corner as the great Jeff Passan, Major League Baseball insider extraordinaire for ESPN, is going to join us to talk some Royals baseball. We'll get into the offseason, the front office additions, changes that they made, the free agency. The moves that they have made there. Bobby Witt Jr., is he going to get a contract extension? Should he get a contract extension? Is Jeff of the mindset that paying that kind of money for a small market team is a good idea? Maybe even get into a little bit about the stadiums. I don't know. Jeff's a long talker. You'll see. Trust me. If you haven't heard him before, he goes wild when you let him free from the shackles of television's 45-second windows that they have. We break it all down right now on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. By the way, I'd like to add, just as a sidebar, that literally everything in the electronics world has decided to crap on me today. You can add Twitter to that list, as it has been a real treat to tweet here today and get everything sent out for everyone. A special edition, as we mentioned, of the Kaufman Corner. Rany, real quick before we bring on Jeff Passan. Are you excited to talk to Jeff? Are you excited to hear him? You know, he's no holds barred. I talk to him all the time on my radio show in the baseball season, and when he thinks your opinion sucks, he has no problem telling you that. Are you ready? Are you ready for that kind of conversation?
I don't know if I'm ever truly ready for a Jeff Passan interrogation. Certainly as a rooting member of the Royals fan base. But I've still got a little bit of nervous energy to blow off after the Chiefs game yesterday. So I'm ready to have my nerves frayed a little bit more by our guest.
As ready as you'll ever be. Is that what it comes down to? I think here it is. Here we go. Let's just make it happen.
Ready to have my dreams dashed for another season.
Last thing I'll say is that we had on Joe Sheehan, got a New York perspective on the Royals offseason, and we had the comment that stuck out to me the most was, wow, I was kind of optimistic for the season, but now all my hopes and dreams are gone. That's what we got with last week's conversation. Will it go better or worse with Jeff Passan this time?
I don't think it's going to go better. I'm going in with those expectations. If I go in with those expectations, I can't be disappointed. So.
And I'm looking at Jeff's face right now as he's listening. It's like mad laughter as he gets ready to come on. Now let's welcome Jeff Passan from ESPN, big time information man for ESPN, one of the best in the business, when it comes to the information of baseball for sure, but one of the best when it comes to an insider of any sports. He joins us here on the Kaufman Corner. Jeff, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. Listen, Rany did not earn his medical degree because he's stupid or because he doesn't know things. So let's just get that out of the way first.
I appreciate that, Jeff. I will say denial is very strong in my blood. So it's taken years of experience watching this franchise to know how this conversation might go.
All right.
Well, let's put it this way. It's going to be a more positive conversation than ours on the radio last year, Soren. So at least we got that going for us.
All right. So there's a start. I mean, I'll take that, right? That is a beginning. Let's backtrack and you tell me what you thought this offseason was going to be for the Royals. Like when you hear the end of the season press conference and we get JJ Picollo talking about they won a couple of starting pitchers. They won a bat. They want some bullpen weapons for Matt Quatrero. You're thinking what? You're thinking this team is going to do what?
Probably not as much as they've done. I think that the spending, into the 9-figure guarantee this winter was in excess of where I thought they were going to go. But I also realized, as I think do probably most of the people listening and watching the show, that the Royals needed to do something, not because they went 56 and 106 last year, which they did, and which was awful for everyone to watch, but because they want to get a new stadium built. And I'm sorry, but you're not getting a new stadium built if public funding depends on voters looking at this franchise and this organization, looking at a perfectly good, I would say, if not great stadium in Kauffman Stadium that they've got already, and saying, hey, if we're going to support you, you got to support us too. Like, you need to put your money where your mouth is. And it's arguable whether they have put their money where their mouth is in terms of the quality of the players they've got. It's inarguable that they've put their money out there and said, you know what, we're not going to let this thing waste away like we're the Oakland A's. We're going to go and try and be better this year. And what constitutes better? I mean, the Royals could be 20 games better than they were last year and still be 10 under 500. So it doesn't take a whole lot to get better, but this is unquestionably a better team than they fielded last season.
Yeah. So the question I have is it good enough to matter? Right? Because like you said, they could improve by 20 games. And I mean, 76 and 86 would be perfectly respectable. Yeah. And it would show on some level a commitment to trying to improve the product, which obviously matters for getting a stadium. But a cynic could look at this and say, yeah, the Royals have spent a ton of money for 2024, but they've made very little in the way of long-term commitments, which has allowed them to get a lot of mid-tier free agents. Seth Lugo might have, a number 2 starter upside, but there's, none of these guys were, top 10 free agents on the market. And, maybe I'm still, cynical after seeing what the Marlins did. What was it, like 10 years ago, when they were going after their new stadium and signed, was it Mark Burley and
Jose Reyes,
a massive outlay of money. And then 1 year late, they got what they wanted. 1 year later, they traded them all away. Yep. But like the idea that, the Royals, if I'm doing the math right, they've added 7 major league free agents in one offseason, which is, I mean, crazy when you think about it. They've added $51.5 million to their payroll for this upcoming year. But 51.5, I mean, that's a lot of money, but like you could have signed Cody Bellinger with that money. I mean, you could sign Cody Bellinger and maybe Jordan Montgomery. Like, how much more would it take to get those two?
You could have signed 2 of them. Absolutely.
If you could sign both of those guys, would the Royals have been better off doing that? Was that even a feasible option? Is it just a matter of they don't want to have to commit for the 5 or 6 years long term? Like, what is it that the Royals actually hope to accomplish by doing this?
I'm not quite sure. I think they want short-term relevance, but I don't know that this makes them relevant. And you used a word there that I think is important to define before I can answer the question. When you say matter, as in they want this to matter, what does mattering look like to you? Is mattering being in the hunt for a playoff spot? Because even though the Royals are in the worst division in baseball, I still don't see this as a playoff team right now. I mean, they'll enter the year with a 2% chance probably of making the postseason. And that's in a division where at the top right now, I'm tempted to pick Detroit to win the Central this year.
Yeah,
I think the Tigers, what they're building now is really good. And I think they've made some savvy moves this winter, bringing in Maeda, bringing in signing Colt Keith to a long-term extension. The development of Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson, who hit 30 home runs last year, bringing in Jack Flaherty, Jackson Jobe, might be the best pitching prospect in baseball right now. I think Paul Skeen's the number 1 pick in the draft last year, is probably ahead of him. Job's right behind him. Like, he's got 4 plus 2 plus pitches. And that's what happens when you go and hit on your draft picks early. And that ultimately, I think, is why the Royals are in the position that they are right now. Soren, we've talked about this a million times. They have not drafted well. Right. They have not drafted well. Simple as that. And you can complain about the bad lottery luck all you want, and it's warranted. Like, I get it. I understand why Royals fans and the Royals front office are disillusioned by what the system looks like right now. But that's not an excuse. Like, if you wanted to get to relevance, to mattering, then targeting one of those big guys was going to be the path to doing it. But it's also the scenario that, the Royals understand where they operate. If they don't hit on one of those contracts, it torpedoes them, because they're just not going to go out and spend over the problem like so many other large market franchises both do and are willing to do.
Jeff, I'm curious, would Cody Bellinger even sign in Kansas City, right? Would he sign
if the money's right? Sure.
You
would,
think
would
so?
Would Chris Bryant sign in Colorado? Turns out the answer was yes.
Yeah, it is, if you pay above market value or fair market value, you can get a guy to come to Kansas City. No,
right? I think Lugo and Waka illustrate that if you're the Royals, you need to go a little bit above market value to get a guy to come here. Not because it's Kansas City, but because the Royals are terrible. And if you are resigning yourself to spending multiple years potentially with a team that is not going to be in contention for a World Series, and I don't care if every single Royals player plays to his 90th plus percentile PECOTA projection, the Royals still are not going to win the World Series this year. Like, that's just the truth. And that's okay. But, the more the front office and ownership understand that they do have to do that, and the more willing that John Sherman is to do that, because JJ Piccolo is willing to go out there and spend money. Like, that's, as much as efficiency is a god to some organizations, the Royals have never operated like that. And they're willing to go out and throw some money around in free agency, as evidenced by giving Waka $16 million a year, by giving Lugo $15 million a year. Those are the sorts of deals that the Rays would never do, but they don't have to do them because they've got such a good development pipeline and have done such a good job of drafting, signing, and developing players.
So the optimistic reaction to what they've done is that they see their system, their pipeline coming online in a couple of years. These are the stopgaps to get them there. Along the way, if everything goes horribly wrong, we saw JJ Piccolo look pretty good as a horse trader, making deals at the deadline and doing a nice job. And so you've now got some more bullets that you can move that hopefully will be useful pieces. If you're not winning, hopefully, part of the problem is if you're losing, are all these guys stinking? But the idea being that, okay, we've gone wrong on our development. In a couple of years, that development will come along and pick things up, and they'll start to have that pipeline the way the Rays do. And then hopefully supplement more with money on down the road. That's what every fan will want. But that's the Rays approach. Which do you think is reality with what they've done? Can the farm system be on? Because we have talked about it. They've got to draft better. Drafts are 3 to 5 years away from impacting the big league club. We're talking about guys being signed for 1 or 2 years, except for Lugo. How much of this is just let's win a few games and get a vote passed? Let's at least put the presentation together like we're going to win a few games and hopefully get a vote passed in April before the season can be torpedoed.
See, here's the thing. I don't see this as the early 2010s where Dayton Moore is doing the process and saying, hey, you have to be patient on Hosmer and on Moustakas and on, Gordon was into his career at that point, but on some of these younger guys who they took with these top picks. I look at the system right now and I don't see that. And neither do evaluators around baseball, through whom I frankly shape my opinion. I mean, as much as my eyes, which have covered baseball for 2 decades now, can look at a player and say, I think this guy's good, I think this guy's not good. I ultimately defer to those who, for a living, are paid to evaluate talent. And they look at the Royal system right now and they don't see a top 100 prospect and they don't see a whole lot of big leaguers there. I mean, you're going to get some bullpen guys because you always do. If somebody can throw hard, they're probably going to end up in your big league bullpen. But in terms of everyday players who will be here by the time those pitchers' contracts, Lugo's contract, Walker's contract, and all the guys sign this offseason for 1, 2, or 3 years expire, I don't think Blake Mitchell is going to be ready. I don't know if Caden Wallace is an impact player. I don't know if Gavin Cross is an impact player. Carter Jensen will probably not be there at that point. Mazzucato, Caderna, we still don't know what those guys are. There's no surefire thing in the Royals organization right now, like there was when Bobby Witt Jr. came in and you knew the talent for a superstar, potential Hall of Famer was there. And, it took him a little while to show it. But, man, I just still remember hearing some of the reports out of spring train or out of summer camp in the COVID year about what Bobby was doing, but also what Nick Prado was doing. So, how much weight those carry, you never know ultimately. And look, maybe a superstar blossoms out of nowhere. You don't see that happen very often, but it has happened. The idea, though, that they're just trying to fill in a couple of gap years before this next new class of Royals comes, I don't know that the next new class of Royals is necessarily here right now. I mean, they may be Royals at the end of the day, but are they going to be the Royals who go out and win a championship? There needs to be a ton of development from these guys in order for me to get to that point where I can say so. And they can be optimistic all they want. They should be. If you're not optimistic about what your future looks like, about what you're doing, raising these players and trying to help them get better, then you have no use running an organization. But at the same time, if we're being realistic, the talent that's in the organization right now does not form the foundation of a championship ball club.
So if I'm hearing you right, Jeff, you're saying that the Royals aren't talented enough to contend in 2024, but on the other hand, they're also not talented enough to contend anytime in the next couple of years after 2024 as well. So this is the conundrum that we are in as an organization. They don't have talent at the major league level. They don't have talent at the minor league level. So if we're trying to find a silver lining here, we're trying to find a silver lining for JG Piccolo, because at some point this is going to affect the front office, their tenure if they
Sure.
keep losing like this. Soren and I have talked a lot about the changes they have made in terms of front office hires, in terms of player development, in terms of coaches. The Royals have brought in a new scouting director, Brian Bridges. They've hired some. Last year they aside from the major league pitching coach and manager, they didn't make a ton of changes to the organizational infrastructure. This year it seems like they've done more. They've even hired a couple of guys from Driveline and Tread. I don't know if you have any inkling from the industry that the Royals are at least on the right track in terms of trying to identify amateur talent, trying to develop the talent that they do have in the system better than they used to, or do people still think the Royals are sort of lost in the wilderness when it comes to modern player development?
Brian Bridges is a very well-respected scouting director, a guy who in his tenure in Atlanta did awesome things and who with the Phillies was really well liked. And so, yeah, that's a good step. Every organization now, though, more or less has someone from Driveline or Tread. So it's not like the Royals are going to be getting these novel concepts that are going to push them ahead of the Rays or the Dodgers or some of these organizations that are frankly seen as needle movers and as being ahead of the curve. No, the Royals are just playing catch up right now. And that's a dangerous thing when you jump on board a trend 5 years after it started. It was like the kid in 10th grade who showed up to school wearing a hypercolor shirt. It's like, no, dude, that was awesome 5 years ago. And these things that they're bringing into the organization, these concepts and these philosophies, they're right. But when the entire industry has moved toward that already, getting some of those gems, getting, the inefficiencies and taking advantage of that is just not something that you're likely to capture. On the other hand, JJ Piccolo at the trade deadline last year went out and got Cole Reagans for Aroldis Chapman. And if you can make moves like that, I mean, that's one of those cases, Rany, where it looks like a star is just materializing out of thin air. And that's that's a really nice thing as a Royals fan to be rewarded with, to get to watch Cole Reagans. I'm not going to say turn into a star, but certainly look like one. I mean, in that stretch, especially in August to early September last year, he looked like one of the 5 best pitchers in baseball. The stuff was there. The poise was there. The command was there. It was the whole package. We have not seen anything like that since Zach Greinke won a Cy Young in Kansas City. I think I can firmly say that. It was the closest thing, I think, was probably when Yordano Ventura came up and we saw this guy with just this electric arm doing unseemly things to hitters. And to see Cole Reagans, a guy who really didn't pitch for like 4 years. I mean, his career looked like it was over because of arm troubles. And that's the only thing that's keeping me from buying in full time on like the Cole Reagans for Cy Young train. I just want to see him pitch a full season. If he can go out and throw 160 plus innings this year, I am all in on him. And he's the sort of guy who can anchor a championship rotation. Like, that's how good the stuff is. But Soren, we have talked so many times about guys doing it consistently. And so, with the Royals right now, if you want to be hopeful, there's a lot to hope for. I am hopeful that Reagans is a 1. I am hopeful that Bobby Witt goes from all-star to MVP, which I don't think is an unreasonable thing now that Shohei Ohtani's out of the American League. I'm hopeful that Michael Garcia's bat catches up to his glove, because his glove's really good at third base, but he does not have a bat to play a corner right now. And so you need to see more power. You need to see him get on base a little bit more. I'm hopeful that they can find something out of MJ Melendez, because God, like the tools are just all there, but the strikeouts absolutely kill it. And I think what I'm maybe most hopeful for is to see just how good Vinny Pasquantino is, because so many teams this offseason called the Royals trying to get him cheap. And, the Royals could have brought in a number of pretty good players if they said yes and they turned it down, because I think they see him and Bobby Witt Jr. and Cole Reagans as like the triad that are going to lead this team back to glory. And it's a pretty good place to start with those 3.
Yeah, it is a good place to start. I'm curious because I will get to Bobby Witt Jr. and his contract in a second, but Aroldis Chapman, they signed for what last year, about $6 million.
Not even. I think it was like
3.5.
3. Yeah,
3.5. This year he went for 10.5 to the Pirates, right? So obviously they made a wise investment, and of course, as you just pointed out, flipped him for Cole Reagans along the way. Anyone in this mix that you think can return? Like, if you were to put your money on, this is the guy in their free agent signings that they can flip for a lot more than anybody was valuing him at now. Is it a Michael Wacha? Is it Lugo? Is it, or no? Is there no, who would be the guy that would give them the most in a trade if they end up going that route?
I mean, Wacha is at $16 million a year, not going to be cheap. Like, if you're getting him at the deadline, that's going to be a $5 million nut right there. Plus, he could potentially opt into that last year of his contract if he gets hurt or otherwise. So I think they're going to have a hard time moving him. Lugo, I don't think anyone's going to, unless he comes out looking like Cy Young, Seth Lugo, I don't think anyone's going to want to take on that $30 million, especially next year's pitching free agent class is pretty good. So I think that longer term commitment and beyond that, how do you think Royals fans would take that? I'm not saying they're Marlinsing it. But Rany, you brought up that point. Like, if you go into a winter or a vote, if you will, trying to buy the fealty of fans. And then the second it goes and gets passed and there's a new stadium on the way, you go and turn around and sell all the guys. You can look back to actual baseball fans and say, hey, remember when we did this with Cole Reagans last year? Like, that's what that deal buys them. I think it buys JJ Picollo the benefit of the doubt at the deadline to go out and make moves. But the casual fans, are they just going to see this as being same old Royals? You know, they're not winning a championship, so they're going to go out and trade all their good players. I don't think Chris Stratton, Soren, has the ceiling there. I don't think Adam Frazier has the ceiling. The reason Chapman brought as much back as he did was because he looked like he was going to be a legitimate 8th or 9th inning guy for a championship caliber team, which is what Texas, it turns out, wound up being. The ceiling on these guys that they signed this winter isn't quite the same as Aroldis Chapman's. It's just that the floor was high enough to warrant bringing them in. And so if you find a team that needs somebody who's just consistent and you know he's going to go out there and either eat innings or you can put him in a playoff start, then yeah, maybe they can move one of those guys. But let's also remember what Cole Reagans was when they got him back. On the day that deal was swung, Soren, did you go on the air and say, hallelujah, look at the Royals? No, probably not. Not because you don't know baseball, but because you looked at his bio, saw that he'd been cut twice, and said, what the hell are the Royals doing trading for another broke dick? Like that's just it's not the sort of thing that generally works out well. Now it has, but I hope this doesn't turn into a situation where the Royals see some sort of market inefficiency in injured guys, because generally speaking, the greatest precursor to a future arm injury is a past arm injury. And because of that, the number of guys you see who have 2 Tommy Johns and come back and have successful major league careers, you can count them on one hand.
Yeah, no, that's Cole Reagans is a unicorn at this point. And it's like every time we talk about the Royals front office in terms of weighing the pros and the cons, you have a whole heaping long list of things on the con side. And then you put Cole Reagans over here, but the Cole Reagans right now, the weight of that is just pushing everything down and balancing the scales. So
as it should, because you don't.
It's the one thing that
at the deadline. I mean, let's put it this way: if the Rangers knew what Cole Reagans was, they would have added him to their to their rotation, and he would have made this championship caliber team even better. I mean, they look back at that deal and they're like, yeah, we got a ring, so that's a little bit of salve on the wound. But for a while, it was a gaping wound, and JJ Picollo was standing there just with a bottle of alcohol, pouring it right into it. Like, that would hurt for the Rangers and could continue to hurt for years going forward. But if we're in a sliding doors world and Aroldis Chapman goes to the Rangers and they get, they don't even make the playoffs, then that looks like a nightmare. A little bit easier when you got a big fat gold ring on your finger.
Not the first time Aroldis Chapman got traded and the team trading him got an excellent return, but the team that got him, they won a ring, and they're not changing anything. I had one question, because this just happened the last couple of days, so Soren and I haven't talked about the Adam Frazier signing, which we'd heard rumors that the Royals were still not done adding talent, and which kind of made me nervous that they were going to add talent that didn't really fit the roster, and they went out and they signed Adam Frazier, which in isolation, it's a 1 year, $4.5 million commitment to a guy who's, a decent player, maybe more of a bench guy than maybe an everyday guy, but a second baseman
he's royalty.
Yeah,
he's very royalty, which is not something that Rany is excited about.
Not particularly, but also it's like, what does he do for this roster as a left-handed hitting second baseman? There are teams that could use that. The Royals have a left-handed hitting second baseman in Michael Massey. And so it makes me wonder, are they planning? Is he just a bench depth guy? In which case, I mean, for the money and the commitment 1 year, guys get hurt. It's nice to have an Adam Frazier on your bench that can fill in when necessary. But it definitely makes me nervous that they're setting up to trade Michael Massey. They've talked about wanting to get a closer or an impact reliever, which, for a team that just lost 106 games, seems like maybe not the top priority. Like, this is the sort of stuff that makes me worried the Royals are still the Royals. Like, have you heard anything? Do you know what their plan is? Or speculate, are they planning to keep Michael Massey? Are they planning to trade him? Is there something else I'm missing here? Because I don't see how Adam Frazier really fits this roster right now.
I haven't heard Michael Massey's name in trade talks. So, I mean, maybe, but I have not heard that out there. I mean, let's say MJ Melendez is DHing. Do you stick Adam Frazier in left field and have him as a bat to ball guy in the middle of the lineup who's not going to strike out a whole lot? What I wonder is, what does this mean for Nick Lofton? Like, where is he going to get at bats? What does this mean for Kyle Isbell? Like, how are they going to spread out those at bats? Is Garrett Hampson going to be on the opening day roster, or is Frazier that utility guy? Like, it seemed redundant to me. If you're going to go out and spend $4.5 million, certainly in the coming weeks, I think there would be better places to do it. But we also have to remember, Rany, what Adam Frazier was a couple of years ago. I'm not trying to discount what he's done these last couple seasons, but a couple of years ago, like, he was an all-star, and not just like an all-star because he was a Pirate. He was an all-star because he hit, I think he was hitting 325 or so. And like I said, like, doesn't strike out a whole lot. Also doesn't hit the ball very hard. And so what are you getting out of that? I think the Royals are probably hoping that he's the guy who they spin gold out of and can flip at the deadline. But this is not the same deadline it was in 2021.
If you are a business owner or manage a business, don't risk accidents and liability in your parking lot. Get your parking lot restriped today. A brightly striped lot cuts down on accident, keeps your parking lot as safe as possible. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lots, no matter what you need done, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Very proud to bring you the Kaufman Corner podcast. Is it possible that what they're just trying to do is raise the level of everything? There's competition now. Michael Massey's a 15 home run hitting young second baseman, but there are also times where, like, he didn't hit for a month, right? It's like, no free passes, right? If you can't, everybody got a free pass. It was an evaluation year. I don't think that was the plan when they set sail from Surprise, but it quickly became that. And to their credit, they embraced it. I like to call it embrace the suck. If you suck, embrace it. And they did. And they played guys and they got it. And now it's like, those days are over. You have to compete. No more does Daniel Lynch and Chris Bubich and the crew get a spot in the rotation. You got to beat somebody out to get there. And they're trying to do the same thing with the bats. Is that a good environment, or is that just a statement that you don't really have, your young talent isn't good enough to be everyday players?
Yes. Here's the thing. Spending to spend is silly. Every player who comes into an organization should have a very specific spot that he's coming into, and gathering talent for the sake of gathering talent, gathering redundant talent, that doesn't speak to a great plan. And I'm not sure that that's what Adam Frazier is here with the Royals. They may see something in him that makes them think he's primed for a bounce back, that he can get back to that, 320 type guy. But there's not a ton of ceiling on these guys. And if we're talking about Michael Massey not hitting for a month, Adam Frazier didn't hit for a year. So that's, I think they want to try and capture some of that surplus value. But capturing surplus value tends to be done by bringing in some higher variance players. And you take the risk that he's going to suck, but you get the reward and you reap it if it turns out he's at that higher end of what his projections were. Adam Frazier's projections, it's a pretty narrow window there. And he was 90th plus percentile back in 2021. He was probably 30th percentile, 20th percentile last year. And hopefully he is better this season. But I just don't, even if he's really good at the deadline, I don't know how much he's going to fetch. And it's not just the dollars, Soren, it's the roster spot too. It's the playing time, it's the at-bats, it's the opportunity for these guys in the organization who you're relying upon. And you need to see, is this somebody, one thing the Royals, I think, have done is not give up on players quickly enough. Like, you need to have confidence and conviction in your ability to look at a player and project whether he's going to be someone who warrants a spot in this organization long term, or if you can still capture some of that prospect value that he has, where other organizations, because they're not as familiar with him, haven't seen the warts that you may know from up close. And it's not just holding on to Joakim Soria for too long, or holding on to Adalberto Mondesi for too long. It's those secondary guys as well, the ones who haven't produced, but who still, in the eyes of some other teams, may be worthwhile, that you need to be able and willing to flip. And I would like to know, is Michael Massey an everyday second baseman in the big leagues? He is old enough now where that's going to be pretty apparent, I think, pretty quickly. And once you know that, you need to be willing to move on if the answer is no. And that's something that the Royals, I think, have been loath to do.
I got one last question for you. We have to. I'm trying to find some sort of happy ending here. So let's talk a little bit about Bobby Witt. Although I'm not sure this is going to have any happier an ending than all the other questions.
Bobby Witt, the happy ending of conversations.
I mean, it comes down to, is there any, if we're not, as a Royals fan, we don't have a lot of hope for the short term or even maybe the medium term. We have to look at the long term, and the long term would be, can the Royals find a way to keep this guy around long term? And if not, then this is the flip side of the happy ending, is if not, at what point does looking to see what he can bring in the trade market start to become, a real possibility? 6 months ago, we brought that up on the show and created a near riot in the comment section. But at some point,
I don't know what you guys said, but if the statement was, if the Royals can't sign Bobby Witt to a long-term contract extension, they should trade him almost immediately. That is correct.
Yes. That was pretty much our statement. It
was a controversial statement at the time. Maybe people are
it's not a controversial statement, though. It's what smart organizations do, because every year that he plays here, and every year he plays on a middling ass team, that's just another year of value you have failed to capture. And what the Rays have done is they've screwed it up for every other organization that doesn't run it with cold-bloodedness. And part of me, like, as a human being, looks at how the Rays do business. And by the way, the Rays are an organization that is run by somebody in Eric Neander, who is probably regarded as like the nicest GM in the entire sport. Like, he is absolutely beloved, but there's the personal and there's the professional. And rather than wail on about the unfairness of it all, being in a division that's with the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, and this Orioles team that suddenly looks like it could be a juggernaut for years to come, the Rays asked themselves a question. And that question was, how badly do you want to win? And the answer to that question was, we want it badly enough where we're going to take all of your favorite players and move them. And the one guy who we're going to sign is going to, in just the worst luck imaginable, is going to be accused of having a relationship with a 14-year-old girl back in his home country. And that's, that's the part of this whole thing that's scary when you're an organization that exists in a market the size of the Tampa Bay area or in Kansas City. You're putting all your eggs in one basket. Now, I'll say this. I would put every egg I own in Bobby Witt's basket. I would, if he wants to get paid, and he should want to get paid at a level of a Julio Rodriguez, at a level, not quite Fernando Tatis Jr., I don't think, even though they are in the same situation after their 2+ season, or going into,
if it would take Tatis money to sign him, as a Royals fan and also as an analyst, I think you have to consider giving that to him. I mean, like you said, you'd put every egg in his basket. And I mean,
Rany, that's a really good contract for Tatis. Like, PEDs notwithstanding, getting $340 guaranteed. And I know Bobby's played in more games. Tatis was hurt his first year. It was COVID second year. So they gave it to him after like 100 games, which was 2 years of service time. But, I think what Bobby's shown over the last couple of years is he can be a Tatis type player. Organizations just look at that contract right now and they're like, how in God's name did Dan Lozano get that for Fernando Tatis Jr.? Like, how did he do that? I will say this. If the Royals aren't willing to start with a 2, then it's DOA. And if they're not willing to go up to 250 plus, I don't foresee something happening. And if that's the case, I get it. But I don't get it because a guy like this in an organization like this doesn't come along very often. And if you have somebody this talented who is here and who wants to be here and who wants to be the centerpiece of this organization's renaissance, I'm not going to say it's just money, but it's just money. You don't have to go and pay him players. You don't have to go out and recruit the guy. He's here already. You just need to convince him with dollars to remain here for the remainder of his career.
I want to back up real quick because when we chatted in the spring training 2 years ago, you were talking like maybe there were conversations about a contract being done before he ever got to the big leagues.
Mm-hmm.
So those conversations happened, right? And they didn't get off the ground, or they got close and they said, hold on.
Yeah, they were never close.
They were never close. But so somebody reached out and they had different views.
Yeah, I just think it's different value. Corbin Carroll signing his contract before the season this year, it was over $100 million, but not by a whole lot. And I think everyone in the sport looks at it right now and says that's a top 5 deal in baseball right now. So I think Bobby Witt didn't want to put himself in that position where he was leaving, not just 9 figures, but like pretty significant 9 figures on the table.
So here's what I would ask you. Where is it now? Because I've heard some rumblings that Witt likes the idea of getting back out on the free agent. Like he's kind of on the, hey, I'll play it out and I'll take my arbitration. And
yeah.
I want to be on the market at like, what will he be? 26, 27?
I think 27.
27 when he gets out there, which is, if he could be a little bit younger, that'd be great. But 27, teams will give you 10, 12 years and overpay. Or is the market shifting?
Yes.
Is anybody looking at, the back ends of some of these mega deals that have been signed and saying, oh, we better pump the brakes, or no?
No, because I mean, if you have a 27, we're gonna see this next winter, Soren. We're going to see Juan Soto go out there at 26 years old. And he's going to, if he has a Juan Soto type season, he's going to get $450+ million. Like that's book it, guarantee it. And it's because he is 26 years old. So if Bobby Witt can go out there at 27 years old as a shortstop, as a guy who probably could, should, and will win a Gold Glove, as somebody who is seen by all the people in his organization as a very good citizen and is a good person, is a good teammate. Like, he checks every box except the on-base percentage box. And I think as he becomes a more dangerous hitter, he is going to get on base more naturally and inherently. Like, teams are going to pitch around him, and I think the walks are going to go up, and his, plate discipline should improve. Certainly has improved, but he's everything you want. And the notion of him going back to Texas and, arriving at the point where Corey Seager probably is going to be, moving to third base. I mean, it's a dream scenario for the Texas Rangers or really for any other team that goes out there. And this is the type of player that you lock up now because this is the type of player you cannot get in free agency.
And there's no reason for him to sign because all the things we've talked about, that he's basically in no man's land. He's in purgatory because there's not a wave of talent his age here that he's going to play with. There's no Hosmer Moustakas buddy cop movie to get excited about the two of them, right?
I don't know. Vinny could be that.
Okay.
Vinny could be that.
Okay. So there's that possibility, but there's no wave coming. I mean, like you basically painted it as it looks like they're still several years away, and the guys that are going to turn this franchise around aren't even in the organization yet. So if that's it, why would you sign? I mean, like, and if you won't sign, then we come back to what you led this with. If he won't sign, you have to trade him as fast as you can.
Why would you sign? Comfort, certainty, all of these things. It's just, all we're doing here is trying to be like, somebody who's predicting the future and somebody who's modeling out numbers. And once it gets to a certain threshold, it's like, okay, this would be dumb to turn this down right now. But that's big money, man. Like that needs to be well into the 200s. And if you're the Royals, if you're John Sherman, that is it's not an easy pill to swallow, but I almost feel like it's one that you have to. And it's almost like actuarial tables be damned. This organization needs someone for every fan here to connect to. And this organization needs someone whose quality of play is worthy of a contract like that and of being seen as a franchise player. And I think Bobby Witt Jr. is the closest thing since George Brett that the Royals have had to that.
Yeah. Let's finish with this. Ballpark, you got any thoughts on the fact that they're going to put a tax, in the town that you live in, they're going to put a tax on a ballot to build a ballpark where? We don't know. Maybe we'll get some news on that. What it's going to look like? Yeah, we don't know. We're not really sure. Maybe we'll get some news on that, and that'll be out there. Is this the way of the world if you want to be a Major League Baseball town?
Yeah, it is the way of the world. I hate it. I do. I think that ballparks for municipal investments in ballparks are some of the worst money that can be spent. But I also want to live in a town with a big league team. And I don't think the Royals are going to move. I don't what bothers me, I think, is that they don't have to. They don't. I think Kauffman Stadium's gorgeous still. I think it's useful. It just doesn't, it doesn't align with how stadiums work these days, which is that stadiums are merely the center of a wider entertainment complex to make money around them. They are the vehicle through which riches can be made with ancillary businesses. And I respect for John Sherman for trying to do this. And I think a new stadium would be super cool, and I'm sure it would be beautiful. And I anticipate it will be passed, and I look forward to watching the game there. I just know that in not just in this city, but every city in America, there are a lot better places that we could be spending our money than subsidizing billionaires to get their money-making vehicles going.
Yeah. It's the cost of doing business. Do you want the
business? It is. And we don't have to like it. And we can tell the truth about it, which I'd like to think is what we're doing here. But we also we shouldn't kick and scream because we should acknowledge that's how this works. That's how this game is played. And it's unfortunate that we're in the position now where this has become so customary that we just shrug our shoulders and say, we wish we could do something, but we can't. But it's a fait accompli at this point that if a ballpark's being built, owners are going to go looking for as big of a handout as they can get. And all you need to do to see that is look at the Oakland A's, who don't have anywhere to play in 2025, 26, and 27 because they found that handout in Las Vegas and took it.
From happy endings to handouts, Jeff, we've run the gambit here on the Kaufman Corner
Kind of
podcast.
one and the same,
I have
right?
to give you credit. Soren said that after Joe Sheehan was on the show that we couldn't have a more depressing guest about the state of the Royals, but Joe set a high bar.
I think that, with all due respect, I think that's a mischaracterization. I don't think that what I'm saying, I'm not going to say that like I'm just saying the reality. It's not. I'm not trying to be. No, I don't think it's depressing if you look at it through like an adult's eyes. This is, if you want to sit here and say the Royals, I mean, my child, God bless him, loves to joke about. I think he's joking when he says the Royals are going to win the Central this year, but he loves to say it just because he knows it. Like, I just look at him like, no, they're not. But if you look at it like, hey, they are getting better and they're trying to put a big league product on the field, you should take solace in that. Joe's a little different from me. Also, I will never be more cynical than Joe Sheehan. Let's get that out of the way right now. Never in any world.
Fair
well, and if I am, oh God, something went really wrong. But Joe looks at this, at the Royals in particular, I think, from the perspective of somebody who observes all 30 teams, and somebody who has no connection to the organization or the city. I look at it from the perspective of, yes, I observe all 30 teams, but I also live here and I'm out at that park and I see this team and I understand the fans because I live among them. And I think Royals fans are understandably more excited about 2024 than they were 2023, because this year, the product that they put out on the field is going to look like a big league team and not what was out there last year. And that is something that the Royals not only should take solace in, but should be appreciative of, that they're giving this town the gift of being able to go to a game and not walk into the stadium thinking on any given day they're probably going to lose, because I don't think that's what this team is going to be. I'm not sure they're going to be competitive. I'm pretty sure they're not going to be in the playoffs. I'm certain they're not going to be in the World Series. But when you look at this team, and whether it is Ryan Lefevre on TV or your own eyes seeing it in person, it's going to look a whole lot different. It's going to look a whole lot better.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think they've improved. We'll see if they've got the big picture plan in place. It's a big year for JJ Picollo for sure, and I think we got to see what this team yields to know what we think of the direction JJ Picollo is taking the team. So we look forward to seeing that. Jeff, always look forward to talking to you. Thanks so much for giving us so much of your time. We appreciate it. I will talk with you when we get the baseball season going, buddy.
It was a great 30 minutes. Thank you, Soren.
You're the best. There he is. Can't help but have a shot going out the door. Jeff Passan. We did tell him 30 minutes. We went a little bit over. Jeff Passan from ESPN. I don't know. Any reaction real quick before we
I appreciate his his clarification at the end, because I mean, he makes a good point that, like, if you look at this through fairy tale eyes, which I can be guilty of sometimes, of thinking that it's all or nothing. Either you are in the playoffs, or you've had a failed season. Then yeah, what the Royals have done this offseason, it does look like a lot of just paddling upstream and just kind of like trying to stay afloat without actually getting better. But if you look at it from a clear-eyed perspective of how do we make this team respectable while we are trying underneath to rebuild the foundation, I certainly would rather they have done what they've done and bring in the talent that they have and spend the money that they have, than to have not done anything.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, look, this is going to be a long-term project, and I've said this before, but I'm hoping we will look back 5 or 10 years from now and say, they hit rock bottom basically in the summer of 2023, right before the trade deadline. And right when we thought things were hopeless, that's when they traded for Cole Reagan. We didn't even talk about Nelson Velasquez, who was another example. Like, you can say, all you want about how the Royals are 5 years behind, and and are not just trying to catch up with the smart teams with all these guys are hiring, but 29 other teams could have traded for Cole Reagans, or I guess 28 or 28 could have, and one could have kept him. The Royals are the ones who got him, and they got Nelson Velasquez, and they got James McArthur even. And it's like, there are signs that maybe they are doing some things that even other smart teams missed on. So it's if we have to be patient with the process here, but we also need to see signs of progress if we're going to stay committed to this front office, being allowed to see this project through.
I think one of the things I want to do, because I was going to give a little spiel, but we're really running out of time, and I don't want to start on this and then go another 25 minutes. But one of the topics I want to do between now and when the season gets going is what our dream season looks like through adult eyes. Not the fairy tale. They win 110 games and it's 50 home runs for Vinny Pascantino and a 40-70 year out of Bobby Witt Jr. Not fairy tale. What realistically the best this season can be.
Soren, are you saying you don't believe in fairy tales? Because this jersey says otherwise. All right, this Chiefs jersey is why I believe in fairy tales. So maybe it's too much to ask for two fairy tales simultaneously, but yes, no, I think there is a scenario in which they are competitive this year. I think even in through adult eyes.
I did too.
But yes, we need to break down how exactly that would happen.
I will say, from the standpoint of the Chiefs are actually +2 or 3 in the turnover differential, which seemed like a Mount Everest, to the mountain to scale, because they've just been sloppy all year. That like the Royals are kind of due for more than one or two ifs to come through in a season. If Brady Singer gets back to what he is, if Daniel Lynch can find it, if Chris Bubich can, there's still 25 ifs. If MJ Melendez can hit, like if there's all these different ifs, they're not due to hit 20 of them. But for a couple of guys to turn the corner this year, they're due for that.
Right. Well, it's I like to be.
That's not my dream scenario, by the way. I've got a whole thing.
No. Well, that deserves its own podcast. But what I will say is, it's easy to be cynical, and I'm certainly guilty of this, is saying that one of the things that has made being a Royals fan so exasperating for decades.
All right, this is Matt.
Okay.
Marcos Valdez-Scantling ain't walking into that Royals clubhouse, Rany.
But what's made it so easy to be cynical about being a Royals fan is that, like, anytime you talk about a what if scenario, anytime there's like, well, what if this happens, if only one player breaks out, that for 20 years that never happened to the Royals. Like the Allard Bear Royals were like the most hapless team. If anything could go wrong, it was the opposite. If anything could go wrong, it would. And so I was trained in my head to believe that scenario, the best case scenario, just couldn't happen. And then in the span of about 18 months, 20 years of, bad luck on the 50-50 propositions, all regress to the mean at one time, right? In 2014 and 2015, it was like all that pent up good fortune that the Royals hadn't had in 20 years came to them. And when we talk about, dream season through grown-up eyes, like that those were close to fairy tale seasons. I mean, 2014, certainly the postseason, last month of the regular season into the postseason, 2015, the whole season was that dream season. So it can happen. Like, my point is, it would be irresponsible to say it's impossible. We have to be responsible about how we project that, but it's happened before. Do the Royals have enough of a talent base going into this season that if everything goes right, realistically goes right, could they be competitive? I think the answer is yes. And we can discuss how that will be in a future podcast.
That sounds good. That's going to do it for us. Remember, we're always brought to you by our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete. With free consultations, no commissions, and in-house crews, every project comes with a written warranty. GAN Asphalt and Concrete keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays, costly expenses. Focus on what it is you do. Leave a good first and last impression with all your clients, all your customers. Find GAN online right now at ganasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. GAN Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. For Jeff Passan, we say thank you again for Jeff Passan giving us a lot of his time. For the good Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.